In the fourth session of the Ohio State University Nighsonger Center Echo on empowering DSPs, we're going to hear from Brittany Kosher, a behavior support specialist at Nighsonger's Clinical Support Services. She'll be sharing strategies on crisis planning and prevention while serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental health conditions. Our learning objectives today are to be able to define and describe the crisis cycle, to identify an escalating situation and employ de-escalation techniques, to describe how to respond to a crisis safely, and to discuss the importance of trauma-informed care and crisis prevention. Pull up the presentation slides, and then we'll welcome Brittany to the stage. Welcome, Brittany. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. Okay, like Dr. Buck said, we're gonna do an overview of crisis planning and prevention. And then here is myself, and then Jane was supposed to be here, but got pulled to another meeting. And like Dr. Buck had just briefly mentioned, the learning objectives of our presentation, again, define and describe the crisis cycle, identify escalating situations, and employing some of those de-escalation techniques, describing how to respond to a crisis safely, and then discuss the importance of trauma-informed care in crisis prevention. And then, why does crisis prevention planning even matter? As we all know in this field, sometimes crisis situations are going to be stressful for all that's involved, including the DSPs and the clients, and again, if there's other people around in this situation. Preventing crises improve quality of life for everybody. It can reduce burnout, and again, foster and build that trust between a DSP and the client they are serving. DSPs serve a very crucial role in preventing and responding to crises effectively. And also, too, it's really important in mind that every person is unique. Every crisis situation can be unique and different as well. Approaches should always be individualized and person-centered. And some of what we may discuss might already be in your client's OISP. So again, just refer to that if there's any other questions. And then what is a crisis? Here's just a visual. Again, it's an unusual, unexpected, and potentially dangerous incident, and it's kind of where they all collide in the middle. So again, it is not something that's going to occur every day. It's definitely going to be that unusual incident. And then how can we prepare for a crisis? The best way to avoid a crisis, again, is to not let it feel like a crisis. So as the DSP, just trying to remain as calm as possible during a crisis. We're trying to build connections with those that we are working with. Being aware of what you bring to the communication. I think there was a couple sessions ago, we really talked about communication, so that continues to be important. Always staying alert while you're working. Knowing your resources and who to contact, and then especially knowing your agency's crisis intervention policy. Again, if there is a crisis, who are you contacting? And again, how are you best going to support the individual that you're working with? Here's a visual of the crisis cycle. Again, it kind of starts with your baseline. Again, everybody's baseline looks different. So getting to know the client that you're working with, to know their baseline is things are beginning to escalate. It's going to peak. And then we're going to work on the calming, de-escalating, some recovery down here, and then hopefully getting back to baseline. All of this could take, depending on the person that you're serving, it could be a 5-minute crisis, or it could be a longer crisis to get back to kind of the baseline. It's also important to know the brain during the crisis. All of us as humans kind of respond one of these ways. You can overlap in these ways. So there's the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I also recommend, as a DSP and a person working with individuals with ID, to know your response to a crisis. Sometimes it's really helpful to know your response to a crisis before we're helping our client get through their response for a crisis. And like I said, fight, again, sometimes our folks could get physical. Flight, they might run out. Freeze, everybody just stops. And fawn, you just kind of fawn over. And there are times where these can overlap. And like I said, it's really important, I think, to know your own response to a crisis as you're helping the client that you're serving go through a crisis. Signs that somebody might be escalating. Again, it is a change in their usual behavior. So again, making sure that it is noted this is not an everyday quote unquote behavior that you're seeing from your client. They might be more restlessness. They might be pacing or tapping more. Body tension. There could be changes in their facial expression, expressing discontent, clenching fists, maybe glaring or staring more, difficulty focusing, aren't really able to concentrate on what's going on or what you're asking for the day. Changes in vocal tone. Maybe they're getting louder. Maybe they're getting softer. Aggressive gestures, pounding, waving arms, pointing, withdrawing, getting quiet. And again, it is noted that these are changes from their usual behavior. If they're always a loud talker, it's maybe not a sign that they're escalating if they continue to talk loud. Maybe a sign that something's going on is maybe they're really quiet, maybe they're withdrawn. Maybe all of a sudden they're walking more, pounding on things. That could be a sign that things are escalating. Here are just some general signs or general de-escalation techniques. Again, you want to pause, you want to stop, you want to resist the urge to correct, argue, or convince, kind of trying not to get in that power struggle with who you're working with. Maybe reminding them of deep breaths, using a calm tone, look and listen, be awareness of your body language. You can always absolutely validate the client's feelings, acknowledge that you hear what they're saying. If something's upsetting them, letting know, hey, I see that this is really upsetting. How can we help get through it? We don't like to be told what to do. So 9 times out of 10, our clients don't want to be told what to do either. Again, just letting them know, hey, you look really frustrated. How can we work through this? It's better to, use I see or it looks like statements. Empathize, focus on the feelings. Again, you don't always have to agree with everything, but again, we can empathize with people. Everybody always wants to feel heard, letting them know that this situation is hard. You guys can work through it together, letting them know you guys are there to help and provide that support. Again, imagine that you're in their place. What would you want to help feel better? How could you, calm down? What needs are they trying to meet? Is it a communication? Are they not feeling well? How can we try to meet them in a safer way? What are some other alternatives? And then sometimes questioning, are we as staff being too rigid? And then again, hopefully kind of working through these general de-escalation techniques, and then finding solutions. And like we said in the beginning, just really being person-centered and see what works for your client. Here are some other tools to try. Again, giving space is always an option if it's safe to do so. If you're able and maybe working with another coworker, sometimes swapping out with another caregiver is possible. That different face might help, kind of go through some of those de-escalation techniques. Again, always reminding people that this is a safe place and we want it to be a safe place. Trying to decrease demands and increase praise. Offer safe and available choices, using those first then statements, and then finding a way to say yes. And then we have some references. And again, this is a very brief overview of crisis planning and prevention. And I think one of the most important things is to use that communication and building that relationship with who you're serving and who you're working with, and trying to work through the crises, because again, a crisis is not going to happen every day. And so it's being prepared, knowing who to contact, knowing some of these techniques that you guys can implement if a crisis does come up. And then if there's any questions.
Thank you, Brittany. I want to open it up to the community to see if there are any questions. Alternatively, you might have heard something that resonated with you that you would like to echo out or emphasize. Christine?
Two things to think about. First, of people who are nonverbal and don't have the verbal communication, and even if they don't talk like us, they may be yelling or going ugh, like that and made up, to try to get their anger out when we need to try to figure out ways to make it more calm. Second, in part of a new thing that's being done, there's going to be this 8-item for aging and dementia that's going to be done in all people DD with services. We just found this out today.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know, Christine. And yeah, it's definitely important to kind of get to know your client, get to know their communication style too.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean they are trying to be aggressive. It's more like how are they trying to communicate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I think that's an important point too, right? We heard about those generalized signs or behaviors that might indicate that that there's an escalation heading towards a crisis. And so the more we can learn about and identify what those signs are for each individual, we can react more quickly to potentially prevent a crisis from reaching a peak point. Question that maybe I had for Brittany, as we're noticing those signs of escalation, maybe just re-emphasizing those strategies that you can take before reaching the peak moment of the crisis, as well as what is the difference between those preventative measures or once you notice escalation versus someone does reach the peak, and how you react on the other side for de-escalation. Kind of how do you transition through those moments from escalation to the peak to de-escalation?
Yeah, and you necessarily don't have to go through the whole crisis cycle. There could be a point where you recognize the sign of whoever is escalating, and again, implementing some of those preventatives to help go back down to baseline. And I think too, remaining calm as the DSP and as the staff, while you're trying to implement and going through the peak and then implementing those de-escalation techniques are a good practice, because again, if it's affecting our body language and the client is seeing that maybe now we're upset, it's hard to kind of build that trusting relationship that they're going to keep me safe, and kind of work through those de-escalation techniques. And again, every person is different and every crisis is going to be different, which is hard for always planning.
Denise.
Hi. I wanted to emphasize a little bit about my client where he's his verbal skills are about a toddler, although he's 33 years old. And so if he wants to change a activity that he's doing, or if he wants to say, express something, he will immediately bite his hands. So that's our indication that he wants to communicate something different. So instead of us getting upset, of course, we're like, oh, would you like this next? And then show him options for things, and see what he wants to go to next. So that's not something that we can prevent him from doing. It's just how he reacts to changing a subject or changing an activity or wanting to talk about something different. So it's not something we always tell new clients or new caregivers, that it's not something to alarm them, but that's a part of his personal behavior. And I've been helping with him for 20 years. And so it's important to know all the little quirks and qualms. I would like to say, if you're a new caregiver, get as much information as possible from the current caregivers, because those little things someone might not take the same way. They might not realize that's just him wanting to change activities, or, I don't want them to get upset about it or be mad that he's doing that or try to somehow stop him from doing it. That in turn makes him angry. So it's just a part of, oh, let's do this next. Would you like this next? Giving him other options to do. And then he chooses on what he would like to do next, so that we don't get to that, deep escalation situation with him.
Yeah, definitely. And I think talking to who's currently working, with the client, communicating those kind of nuances that sometimes are hopefully in the OISP, but it is a very large document to read. And, we all read them, but if we're reading 50 pages, some things just, we're humans and could forget.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that example, Denise. And, others can think about, beyond questions, do you have, specific strategies that you've employed with clients that you found particularly helpful? And I'll pause and see if anyone else would like to share as well. Denise, something else to add?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that as an independent provider for 20 years, this has been my career. In fact, I've been lucky enough to be with the same client. So I like to tell new caregivers that we meet often about the importance of patience and about learning all those individual little nuances and be super, super consistent.
Absolutely. And I think too, Denise, it's kind of learning about how you respond to a crisis as well. And, kind of knowing, are you going to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? How are you going to respond to? That's important when caring for another individual.
Legia, I saw you unmute. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I think one of the big things that kind of to pull from history, we always say, think about how loud something is, or, the lighting. But I think we could take things even a little bit further with that, and think about, just really setting the environment. What, can you put pictures that absorb sound? Can you put sound panels up that could have decorations on them? Can you, a lot of people can't have rugs. Carpet is not always in every home anymore. How pingy are things? How do things in the environment sound? What's the flow of the room? What does it look like when you look at it? Does it look congested? Does it look like the furniture could be moved around? Or do we need to make a nook or a corner that the person can go to? I think anything in the environment that can prompt a person to naturally seek it out can go a really long way for their well-being in general, can set the stage for the day. Really thinking about just sort of laying out that environmental map How do things look? What's somebody's favorite color? Paint their bedroom that color, just different things to kind of think about, a blanket on every chair or couch, or, what kind of pillows, if they need a pillow to kind of curl up with on the couch. Just having those things available, I think sometimes taking it off of staff's verbal prompting can be really, really beneficial. So thinking of how to take it off of staff's response and let the environment do it enables a person to be really independent. Just a lot of things that I kind of train staff and kind of really pull out in assessments too, to get staff to start thinking about what that picture might look like.
Yeah, definitely. I see Dr. Whitwer has her hand. You can go, and then we can respond to both.
Oh, I was gonna let you. Yeah, I can go ahead and respond. I really kind of related to what Alicia was saying, especially about creating a space for the person, right? So having somewhere that's a safe space that they know they can go to, that is comforting for them. I know we even see that in our clinic setting when we have kids and adolescents that have had a history of trauma, is when they walk in and they're nervous about interacting with us, we work to create a corner of the room that's theirs, that they can go to have. So like you said, Lisa, it gives them that safe place that they can go to. And maybe it takes a little bit of prompting at the beginning, but then if they can learn, that's their spot. And it's also kind of a nonverbal cue to everybody, hey, I need a little bit of space right now. It can just be a really nice way to give them control of their environment and help to de-escalate stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. So, and again, the space could be a chair. It maybe isn't a whole bedroom if they're sharing a bedroom, it could just be maybe their favorite chair, their favorite spot in a room, and kind of piggybacking off of that, if there's items, maybe they need something to do with their hand or turn on the music. Again, kind of, there's a lot of general de-escalation techniques, but all of these are going to be person-centered of whoever you are working with. Maybe rock music calms some people down. Maybe that could escalate the situation further. And so it's just getting to know your client.
And I see Brenda's added something in the chat, using beyond even environmental things, sensory applications like essential oils. Some of these smells are really intended and can induce a calming effect. Brenda, would you like to say anything else about that? Yeah, and thank you for using the chat to share, continue to engage with each other in that way as well. And you can react and respond to each other in the chat as well. Andrea?
Yeah. Hey, Andrew, I was thinking about the scents, which I think is right. That's another great person-centered thing. I love lavender, so I have a little sachet of lavender that I like to smell to help calm me. But I think that's another one of those important things that's going to be really person-centered, because sometimes what one person might find as calming, another person may find either just unpleasant or if they have something, an experience associated with that smell. So I think that's one of those things that would be really important to understand what helps that individual person. Sometimes it smells, sometimes it's not. Sounds like for your client, Brenda. Yeah, so he lavender, there you go, right? So I think it's all about, again, choice and thinking about what helps that person and helping them build those skills themselves. That, like your son, Brenda, that's awesome that he now knows to request his lavender.
Yeah, great point, right? It's individualized. And I think something that resonated with me as you're sharing that as well, about people's choices, is that it's so important. I mean, not only communication preferences, but to have these conversations at baseline, right? Once we step onto the escalator or into the elevator and push a button, or the light switch goes on, we're beyond that point of knowing what to do. And so these types of conversations are so important to have at baseline when you're building rapport with a client and getting to understand them better, so that as you notice these types of behavioral changes, you can start that process of validating and empathizing and employing some of those techniques that resonate with them because they've communicated that to you. Christine?
I can say to you that sometimes there's these sprays like I put in my house, and that has different calming effects, because sometimes if somebody just likes to have the air wick spray of something, some smell, whether that's lavender or what, and you spray that around and then let it sink in, then it makes people feel good, like, oh, I'm in this fresh area, instead of some place that isn't fresh, just to say.
Thanks, Christine.
Cindy?
Thanks, Andrew. I know for our home with our son with multiple disabilities, sometimes we mirror if he's upset. It's like, well, I'm upset too because you're upset. What should we do? And so just kind of mirroring how he's feeling, and then just kind of opening it to a conversation. It's like, well, I'm upset too. What do we do? Do we hit? Do we do? And he's able to kind of calm down a little bit because now he's helping me kind of strategize. And then another one we do is we kind of get upset in front of our son. If I drop something and I'm frustrated, I can kind of label that. And I was like, oh, that made me mad. I dropped that. And if he's there, well, what do I do? Do I throw it? That kind of thing. Because I want him and others that we serve to understand that all of these feelings and behaviors are validated and so normal. But if I'm just around somebody, I'm always happy, then sometimes that can be hard for them to be vulnerable, to be angry, and to be able to speak up. But for us to say, well, that makes me mad, they cut me off in traffic, what do I do? Do I yell? What do I do? And so for him to see us go through the motions that he does too, it really helps him in processing it when it's his turn to be all in the field. So
that's a really good point, Cindy. And like Brenda just chatted that they kind of do a very similar technique in their home too. And I think it is important for the clients that we serve to know that to validate their feelings and let them know that they're being seen and heard, and that you're there to help work through them. And I agree, we're all humans, and nobody has a perfect day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brittany, for presenting that information to us, and for the community for sharing some of those strategies. And at this time, we're going to transition to our case study. And Brittany's on double duty today, so I'm going to pull up our case, and she's going to walk us through the case. As a reminder, you can find the presentation and the case study in your iEcho account as well. If you're a visual learner, like to have access to that text. I'm going to pull it up and share it on our screen.